but, yeah, they might need to really
So good afternoon, everyone. We are on the, well, first of all, it's Friday, which is a good thing. But then just to remind you, even though you don't need it, I will not be here Monday, so you can come here. Because you'll be lonely if you come here. No, no. But I'll be here Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday. So, let me start by returning some graded homework, and then we'll get to the homework at hand, as we usually do. Okay. So for today, you have a handout on secondary dominance, section 1 spelling, section 2 part writing, and section 3 elements. All the important things you need to do when you learn new chords. I am, I believe, planning to collect this today. Yes, we'll be collecting this today for grade. So let me see if anyone has any questions about something I can do about what I do. Yeah.
I just need to pull up.
Okay.
I have a few questions about this. The chord analysis of, on the third section, and the fourth chord that you're supposed to analyze.
Okay. Are you talking about like the Mozart example?
Beethoven.
Okay, the first example in section 3,
Yes, yeah, sorry.
and then the fourth.
Yeah, the fourth chord you're supposed to, and then the second measure.
Yep, okay. I think I see where you're going. All right, so one thing about this Beethoven example is that both staves are in the bass clef. Both staves are in the bass clef. So the second chord in the second measure has some octave Fs in the bass, F naturals. And up above, we have, although it's kind of hiding behind the circle non-chord tone, we have a D, we have a G. The C is a non-chord tone, and then it actually goes down to a B. So these really are the chord tones for that second half, or the second chord in measure 2. So it looks like it is a 7th chord. This has got 4 pitches. G, B, D, F with G to root. And we're in the key of C major. So I would actually analyze this as just your regular normal 5/7 chord, but inverted.
14.
Yep, that's what I would do. This is the chord you were asking about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just call it a 5/4/2.
I'm not sure why I was confused on that, to be honest.
Well-
Like, I even like looking at it now, I
Well,
was confused. But I'm
Maybe,
not sure.
was the circle tone, was that confusing? Maybe?
Well, I think it threw me for a loop, the fact that they were both bass clef in the first place.
Okay.
And I think I just had trouble processing it afterward. It might have just been a one-time thing.
Okay. Sure thing. No, yeah, I'm happy to go through it. I would just call that your standard 5/4/2.
So, can I ask where the B is that you were talking
The
about?
B? Yeah, it's the 8th note, way at the end of the measure in the highest voice. Do you see it?
Oh, that's part of that chord? That
Yeah.
might have also
Yeah, because the C is a dotted quarter, so it lasts for a good part of the measure, but it's not part of the chord.
been. Okay.
Yeah. Mhm. Yep. other, oh, here's another question,
It's
yes.
the second section, five,
5705, is that that middle one? Okay. Let's get a green staff going here. I actually can't wait till we do it. Maybe you're really loud. Okay, so let's go to, we have 3 sharps in the key signature. And that key signature, I think, holds true for all of the measures. And we got 575. And they're in the key of F sharp minor. And I think the way I voiced it or gave it to you, I gave it to you like this. D sharp here, F sharp here, and B sharp here. Is that correct? All right. So we need to part write this to what it's supposed to go to. And a 5705 should go to a 5. And root position 5 would be best. Okay, so a 5 in F sharp minor is going to be built on the root C sharp. So the base has to be on C sharp. But before I get too far ahead of myself, I want to identify the tendency tones. There's 2 of them in this chord, and see if I can resolve them the way they're supposed to be resolved. All right. One of the tendency tones in this chord is the F sharp. It is the 7th of the chord. And as the 7th of the chord, it needs to go down by step. And I note that I'm trying to spell a major 5 chord here. So back in Theory 1, we learned that in a minor key, you need to raise T in your 5 chord with an accidental. So I don't want E natural, but I want E sharp in this chord. And I have to put that accidental on that note. The other tendency tone that I have in the first chord is the B sharp. It's what I call the secondary leading tone. That is, it's a leading tone to the root of the chord that's coming after it. And especially because it's in an outer voice, it needs to go up by half step to the root of that chord that I'm trying to reach and spell. All right. Now, it looks like I've got almost everything I need in my 5 chord, but it looks like I need a G sharp, and I don't think I can get a G sharp. My tenor is my only voice left, and if I were to take the D sharp down to a G sharp, you know what that would create? What error it would create? It would actually create something called contrary perfect fifths. Because G sharp to D sharp is a perfect fifth, and if I take it down to a G sharp, C sharp to G sharp is also a perfect fifth. And you can't have perfect fifths on different pitches between the same 2 voices in consecutive chords. You can't have octaves in the same way either. So I can't put the G sharp in there. I have to leave the 5th out. So it's going to have to be an incomplete triad. And so if I leave the 5th out, where should I take this tenor's D sharp? What is the best choice? C sharp. Yeah, it's better to triple the root than it is to double the 3rd of the chord. So, but just because I'm starting with a complete 5/7 here and secondary T is in an outer voice, it's forcing me to end up with an incomplete resolution.
I have 2 questions about that. First of all, if you didn't mark that it was incomplete, would that be a contract? Just like for future reference.
No, you do not have to do that. I'll be able to see, if you part right correctly, I'll be able to see what's going on.
Okay, and then the second question, maybe you already said this, but I think I missed it. Couldn't you, it probably would be wrong, but I want to know how.
Okay.
If you kept the G in the bass, and then just had it as a 5/6 chord,
Okay, yeah, the problem with that is we don't write any second inversion triads unless they're 1/6/4s, passing 6/4s, or neighbors.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Otherwise, you cannot write you should not write a 6/4. Potential 6/4, passing 6/4, neighbor 6/4 is the only ways, legal ways, legitimate ways we're supposed to write second inversion triads. Now, if you had a 7th chord, you could put it in, if this was like a 5/7, you could put it in second inversion and have 5/4/3. That's fine. But triads, you don't want to mess around with the second inversion unless it's one of the 3 ways we talked about. So I would end up doing an incomplete 5 for this one. That's what I would do. Was there another question about something? Okay.
So, in the first measure of the second
Yep.
section,
Okay.
for the 5, 6, 5, 2, 4, for the second half, I doubled, I doubled F, and I don't know
Yeah.
if that's.
Okay, maybe we should look at that one then. So the first measure is that, do you have a 5, 6, 5, or 6?
That's what I meant.
Okay. I was just checking. I hope I didn't give you a 5 or 4 or something. Really? Okay. 5, 6, 5, 6, 5, or 6. Should go to a root position 6. And I think the way I voiced the first chord for you is, it's C sharp in the bass, E in the tenor, an A in the soprano, and a G natural in the alto. Okay, so we're looking at an A, C sharp, E, G, dominant 7th chord. And the 6th chord we're going to is going to go to a chord whose root is D, because an F sharp minor, a 6th chord, is built on D. So you need to have D in the bass. And when I look at find the 2 tendency tones in this given chord, you'll find out that C sharp is one of the tendency tones. It's what I call secondary leading tone again. It's the leading tone to the root of the tonicized chord that I'm emphasizing. And because it's in an outer voice, it does have to go up by half step. So that's a given. The other tendency tone in this chord is the G natural. It's the 7th of the chord A, C sharp, E, G. And we know 7ths of chords always move how? Down by a step. So this has to come down to an F sharp, it looks like. Okay. To finish out my 6th chord, I don't have to double anything strange. It's just going to be in my standard root position 6th chord. So it looks like I'm going to need another D and A. Yeah, so A and the soprano can just stay right where it is, and this can just come down 1 step. And then we have everything we need.
I think that was an honest mistake, because I think I accidentally saw perfect fifths where it was actually major thirds.
Oh.
And so I wanted to avoid the perfect fifths.
Yeah. Yeah, no, parallel thirds are always fine.
Okay.
Parallel thirds. Any kind of third, minor third, major third. Okay. Well, 15 minutes in, I'd say that's pretty good. Could you make sure your name is on this one, and I'll come around and collect it? Just because I have nothing to do over Easter.
I'm just gonna take a picture of
It's
it.
gonna,
Fix it.
it'll fall down.
He's like, oh, worries. No chance.
So today, according to the assignment sheet, we're moving away from secondary dominance just to make learn a slightly different chord, something called a secondary leading tone chord. Just a teeny bit of background or kind of context. You know how I spent a lot of class time talking about how when you have a chord that's not tonic, so let's say something like a 2 chord, right? And you precede it with its own dominant, like a 5 or a 2. We say that because this chord is preceded by its own dominant, we say this chord is emphasized, the technical term is it's tonicized. It's temporarily made to sound more important or almost like a tonic for just a brief moment because it's coming after its own dominant and it's so used to hearing 5 going to 1. Well, any major or minor triad that can be tonicized by its own dominant, by its own 5 or 5/7, can also be tonicized by its own leading tone chord. So for instance, we can have something like this. And the reason we can have that is because doesn't the 7 chord have dominant function? If we go back to our function chart from weeks and weeks ago. The 5 chord, of course, has the strongest of all dominant function. But the leading tone chord, the 7 chord, that diminished chord, it does have dominant function also. And so, again, if we can tonicize a chord that's not tonic by preceding it with its own dominant, something with dominant function, we can also precede a non-tonic chord with its own leading tone chord. And we say that this chord still makes this one sound more important, tonicizes it briefly, because it's being preceded by its own leading tone. Okay? So really, any chord that has dominant function can serve as or be used as a secondary chord. And when I say secondary chord, I mean like a 5 of something or a 7 of something. Now, we're never going to use the potential 6/4 as a secondary chord. It has dominant function only because it's followed always by a 5. So really, it turns out that these, the dominant and the leading tone chord, these are the only 2 types of chords that have the power to tonicize a chord that's not tonic. In other words, these 2 are the only 2 chords in music that have the power to be secondary chords. We have secondary dominance, which we spent several classes on, and now we're going to learn what's called secondary leading tone chords. And I call them secondary leading tone chords because the root of these chords is always the leading tone to the root of the next chord. These are always built on the leading tone to the root of the chord that follows. These chords are built on the dominant of the chord that follows. But these chords are built on the leading tone to the root of the chord that follows. Okay? Let's see here. Okay, so not only can the 7 diminished triad be used as a secondary chord, but also the 7ths can. So for instance, this, that's possible, and so is this. The triad, just 3 notes, and then we have 2 types of 7th chords possible. One's, well, we have the half diminished 7th chord and we have the fully diminished 7th chord. Okay? So, whereas with the secondary dominance, it's either 5 or 5 of or 5/7 of. With leading tone chords, we can have a triad of something and a couple different types of 7/7s. And that's really, that's the whole picture right there, basically, in terms of secondary chords. There are no others. There are no others in music. Now, let's go through just a little bit of basics here. When the secondary, when the secondary leading tone triad is used, right, just 3 notes. it needs to be used in first inversion. Just like we would only see and use a regular 7 triad in first inversion. We do not use diminished triads in root position. And that goes back to because there's distant intervals above the base when you do that. And this is the only inversion where there are no distant intervals above the base. So because we use the regular normal 7 diminished triad in first inversion, we must also use it in first inversion as a secondary leading tone. So you'll never have 7 diminished of something. You'll never have 7 diminished 6/4 of something. That's a mess. Only 7 diminished 6 of something when you're using the triad. Now, when you're using the 7th chord, you can use any and all inversions. You can use 7 half diminished 7. You can use 7 half diminished 6/5. You can use 7 half diminished 4/3. And you can use 7 half diminished 4/2. All inversions base positions of the 7th chord are usable. If the chord to the left of the slash is the 7th. So then the final question becomes, when a secondary leading tone 7th chord is used, like one of these, this one or this one, the question is there a rule, or how do you know when to use the half diminished one or the full diminished?
Is it based on the key, or like, isn't it just major?
Well, it's technically not based on the key of the passage, but it's technically based on what type of chord it's tonicizing. Okay? So let me see if I can get rid of this and just start from scratch. The book talks, and I don't need you to memorize this rule, but the book talks about the rule on page 273. If the triad to be tonicized is major, like if we're going to do a 7/7 of 5, you can use either the half diminished 7th chord or the fully diminished 7th chord. Either one or both, I should say, are legal and allowed. But when the tonicized triad is minor, like I had before, you are only supposed to use the fully diminished version of the 7th chord, not the half diminished version. I don't make these words up. Trust me, I don't. It's in the book. The nice thing about this is that since I'm not making you memorize it, if you're not sure which type of leading tone 7th chord to use in a given situation, isn't it true to say that no matter whether your tonicized chord is major or minor, can't you always use the 7 fully diminished 7 in all cases? So if you're ever in doubt and you don't remember which one to use and which one you can't, just use 7 fully diminished 7 or something and it's good. Okay. And I don't know if I need to go into any more detail on that. Does anyone have any questions about that? It's not, I don't want to make a huge point about that because it's really not that big of a point. The bigger point is going to be learning how to spell and analyze and recognize these chords.
Sorry, so if we have the 7th chord on 2, and it's in a,
Like this?
yeah, but like if it's half diminished, does that change anything? Or?
Yes. For instance, you remember back with secondary dominants, only major and minor triads can be tonicized by a secondary chord. So you would never have something like this because a half diminished, any kind of diminished or even augmented chord can never temporarily sound like that. So that would never ever be a possibility. Only major and only minor triads can be preceded by, well, and 7th chords can be, but not diminished. Okay. Now, just like the secondary dominants, like a 5 of 5 or a 5 of 2, whatever. I have made a big point several classes ago to tell you that these are chromatic chords. In other words, over 95% of these chords they require to have, that you put at least one accidental or one or more accidentals on them, because not all of their notes pitches fit in the key exactly. So these are chromatic chords, and they almost all of them take at least one accidental. Well, so also then these secondary leading tone chords are also chromatic chords. And they will, over 95% of them will require at least one accidental to spell them properly. Okay? So let's talk about how to spell a secondary leading tone chord. And just as with secondary dominance, the book goes through 3 steps. And if you follow the steps in order, they're found on the bottom of page 274 in the textbook. Which one do I want to use as a... I guess I can use the example that the book uses. This doesn't matter if I use triple top or bass clef. I'm going to E flat major. Oh, and by the way, the homework for, not Monday, because we're not going to be here Monday, but the following Wednesday, it's in the workbook, just like you had to spell those secondary dominants. Did you remember to include your key signatures this time from the measures before you spell the chord? Because it's in the directions, but I just want to remind you, you will have to include your key signature. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to include my key signature. So, now, let's say we're asked to spell this chord. I read this label, the symbol, just like I read the other secondary chord labels, secondary dominant. The chord to the right of the slash translates to and fits right exactly in the key. So I find the root of the chord to the right of the slash first. What is the root of a 6th chord in E flat major? C. Right. Now, whereas before with secondary dominants, we were supposed to go up a perfect fifth and find the dominant to that pitch. That's not what these chords are about. We're actually supposed to find the leading tone to this pitch. To find this chord's root, the one we're trying to spell. Because this, again, I can't stress enough, this is a secondary leading tone chord to the 6th that it's going to end up going to. So, how do you find the leading tone to any pitch? You go down a minor second. It's always a half step. To find a leading tone to anything, it's a minor second below. So what note is a minor second below a C? A B. Not B flat though, right? B natural. Okay? So B is going to be the root of the chord. And maybe you can see when I put this chord on the staff, I'm going to have to put a natural on the root right away. Alright, so I found the root of the chord I'm trying to spell. This is truly the leading tone to C. It looks like I'm going to spell the chord in root position. Let's do it up here. So there's my root. Can't forget the accidental. How do I spell a fully diminished 7th chord on any note? It should be all stacked what? Minor thirds, that's right. So a minor third above a B natural is a D. A minor third above a D is an F. And what's a minor third above an F? A flat. And that is in the key signature. D is natural, F is natural. I think that's what all I need to do for my final answer. And what this says is that this BDFA flat chord is a leading tone chord to C minor chord. So far, so good. Any questions? Did I lose anyone yet? All right. Let me take a few minutes now and tell you, or show you some things about what not to do. Because I have this happen, it doesn't matter what year in my experience, students will always do this, especially if you do your work quickly and you're not focused or paying attention. Or if you do your work while you're watching TV or listening to something or half asleep or whatever. It's easy to do this. Many people will look at this and they'll say, oh, well, I know this. The root of this is C. And then they'll say, oh, down a step down. The root of this is B flat. And then they'll start with the wrong root and the entire chord is wrong. Because they calculated the root incorrectly. This is a major second below C. Major seconds below notes, they're not leading tones at all. It has to be a minor second. So be very careful about that in all cases. It doesn't matter what key you're in, what your roots are or whatever, but once you find the root to this chord, it's got to be a minor second only below. Here's another thing that some students do. They're like, oh dude, the root of this chord is a C. So what's a half step below a C? Well, that means the root of this chord must be C flat. I don't know. I do a terrible impression. I'm sorry, I'm terrible about that. This is not going to work either. You can't have an augmented unison below to calculate the root. That does not fly. It has to be exactly a minor second. It has to be spelled as a different pitched letter name than the root of this chord. Must be. Yes?
Just out of like complete curiosity, is another way you could do it, like you go down a second and then the key, like whatever the key or C is, like that would be the accidental way you would have that.
If you want to think about it, I think that'll work. So I think what she's saying is that the root of this chord is C. Just think about a C scale. What's the leading tone in any C scale, major or harmonic minor? You have to use the harmonic minor. It's B natural. Yeah. So yeah, that'll work to help.
Yeah, so like, if I saw it's in the key of C and then I go down, which is B, and then I look at what the key of C is B natural, right?
Yeah, that should work. But remember, you need to use whatever accidental is necessary to make this exactly a minor step below this. This pitch has nothing to do with it. It doesn't matter what key you're in. Just find the pitch first and then make it what it's supposed to be on the staff, based on that key signature. So I would say that most of these secondary leading tone chords, you'll have to have an accidental on the root. Whereas with secondary dominance, the accidentals can sometimes show up in other notes or in other places. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's do maybe another one or two of these. Let me take another one or two out of the book. Let's go to B flat major. And let's try. Well, you know what? Just for variety, I'm going to do another one. Let's try going in G. The signature is required. 7 diminished. Oh, half diminished. Half diminished 4, 3, and 5. Wow, this is a beast of a chord. But we can solve it. We can go through the process. Let's think of what is the root of a 5 chord in G, first of all. D. What's that? Did his thumb fall? I'm missing something. All right, let's just keep going. What is D's leading tone? Go down minor second exactly. Thank you, C sharp. All right. And that's the root of the chord we're trying to spell. But before I put it in the staff, because I see it's going to have to be an inversion, I think I'm going to figure out the notes over here on the side and then figure out what it's inverted. So how do we spell a half diminished seventh chord on a given pitch? Well, it's minor third, major third. Got that. Okay, so a minor third above C sharp is E. A minor third above E is G. But now a major third above G is from B. Those are the 4 notes I need to record to be right. Okay, and then which one of these goes in the bass? The G, because now we're in second inversion. And now let me not forget any accidentals I need. So I've got G, I've got B, I've got C sharp, and I've got E. There, that's my final. But you see there's a lot to pay attention to, a lot of details you got one. Let me move on to them analyzing or recognizing these chords. We'll do several examples of those to make sure you know how to do that. Is it a joke?
No.
No? Okay. That's okay. All right.
I'm just gonna give you this.
That's fine. That's fine. I'll take that. Okay, so let's take a look at this chord here. And we're in C major. So no flats, no sharps in the key signature. But I've got this really obstinate, stubborn, chromatic chord, fully diminished piece of, no, I'm just kidding. But you know what I mean? It's this diminished chord, and it doesn't fit in C major because it's got this G sharp. How do I analyze that? I mean, if it was G, B, D, F, just D natural, I could analyze it as a 5-7 and then move on to the next chord. But I can't. Okay. So the question is could this chord up here be a secondary leading tone chord or something in C? Let's go through the steps to verify and make sure.
You want me to tell you the steps?
Sure.
Okay. So you're gonna see first if it's minor. So I'll half diminished or a fully diminished.
Okay, good. Yeah, in fact, you gotta look at the chord first, and first of all, is it a diminished triad?
No.
Yeah, no, technically it's not.
I mean,
It's
I
got-
thought you were saying the track itself, because yes, the track.
Right, if it was a diminished triad, that's still fine. This could be like a 7 diminished of something as a triad. But it actually has 4 notes, so it's not a 7 diminished triad or something, it's gonna be a 7-7 or something. Is this 7th chord half diminished or fully diminished? Which one is it? Fully diminished, that's right. That's right. So, there's this distinct possibility so far that it could be a 7-7 something. Now, do you have another step, Lexi, that you're going to talk about? Or? Okay.
So you're gonna do literally the same thing that you do with the others.
Yep.
So you're going to find out what the root of the 7th chord. You're gonna find out what is the leading chord.
Yes,
What
that's
key
right.
it is.
And how do we do that? Well, with secondary dominance, we wanted to find out the root was the dominant of something, so we'd have to go down with it. But now we're trying to find out what is G sharp the leading tone of? Because this is a leading tone. And to do that, yeah, you go up a minor second. We're saying G sharp would be the leading tone to an A. Again, a minor second higher. Now, finally, would a major or a minor triad on A logically naturally fit this key? Which one? A major or A minor?
Minor.
A minor. And what Roman numeral would it be in C? So I'm saying that, first of all, the type or the quality of the chord is correct. It could be a leading tone 7th chord. Then I checked, is G sharp, the root of this chord, is that a leading tone to something that supports a chord that fits in this key? Yes, we found that out too, so everything fits, and I can give it a label. Try another one of these. Okay. The next one the book has is an alto clef. F major, 1 flat, B flat, and B signature. And first of all, is that a triad or a 7? A triad. So the only possibility is, I mean, can it be one of these? Well, let's see. First of all, is it a diminished triad in first and root? Yeah, because the root is right here. The root is G. G, B flat, D flat. It is a diminished triad and it is in first and root. So it's possible 7 diminished 6 of something. Go back to the root again. If it's a secondary leading tone chord, we're saying that G is the leading tone to the root of whatever root it connects. What note is G the leading tone to? A flat, right? Go up a minor 7. Does anything built on an A flat fit in F major? No. So guess what the final answer is for this? That's right. Yep. This cannot be a secondary leading tone of anything in F major because there is nothing in F major that exists for this to be a leading tone of. Whatever it's a leading tone of doesn't fit or even exist to belong in F major.
I really doubt this will ever happen, because I know this is just when we're like building the chords and the sheet that we did. But like, has any composer like ever like done like not had what is okay.
You mean if they ever
So,
accidentally like use something that wasn't?
Well, yeah, like if it wasn't fully diminished or like half diminished, like does that happen before? Is that just like for these kinds of situations?
Yeah, probably just for mostly these kinds of examples. I think generally for the most part, if somebody's writing actual music and wants to use these, they know what they're doing. They know how to do it correctly. If there's a mistake somewhere, it's probably a mistake done by the editor or the copy editor or something like where it gets lost in the process of publishing or something. Yeah. Okay, I think we have time to do one more of these. Okay, maybe I'll try number. This looks like a cool number 5, which is in chart class. I'll just do this. C minor. Okay, there's definitely a chromatic chord in C minor. It's got an A natural and a G flat. So you can't call it like some kind of strange, bizarre 6/7 chord or something like that. That doesn't make sense. Now, let me ask you this, how do I know that this isn't possibly a secondary dominant second or something? Yeah, because the chord itself is not major minor, it's not a dominant seven. So it's not, I'm not going to analyze it like as a 5/7 or something, because it's diminished. So that means, in fact, you tell me, is it fully or half diminished? Fully diminished. So that means there's a potential that it's Well, we don't know what X is yet, but it's one of these. Okay, let's go through the rest of the process. It's the right type of chord. The root of this is A natural, so we're saying yes.
Sorry, this is just a real quick question.
Yeah.
Since we're in a minor key, you probably wouldn't need to ask yourself if it's full or half diminished, right? You can just assume that it's full. Or is there a case in which you should still ask yourself that question?
You probably should just to be safe. I'm trying to think. Yeah, because even in minor keys, like for instance, you could have, I'm not saying this is what it is, but in minor keys you can have something like this, because the 3 chord in minor is major. And so that means since this is a major chord, that this could technically
Oh
be
yeah,
that.
'cause you said it's about the chord that it's needing to go
Yep,
to.
that's right.
Yeah,
Yep. Okay. But we're dealing with the fully diminished 7th chord. Okay, so we're saying that the root A then is the leading tone to whatever the root of the next chord would be. What is A natural, the leading tone of or to? What note? B flat, right? Go up a minor 7. Does a major or minor chord on B flat fit in the key of C minor? Yeah, which one? Major or minor? Major, that's right. In other words, we're saying A natural is, well, that's already in the key signature. A natural is the leading tone to B flat, and I can spell a major triad B flat D F, and that fits in C minor. What's the Roman numeral of that though? Remember those? Capital 7? So my final answer is this. It's a 7/7 on the 7. Isn't that amazing? So many 7s. But if you figure it out, it does make sense. We can have capital 7s in minor keys.
What function is the major 7 have?
It doesn't have an official function. That we need to know about. Nope. Yep.
Would we ever find a major 7/7 chord?
Nope.
No? Okay.
Not in this class. Or any, not in any of the ones I teach. So you were thinking, could you have a 7/7 of a 7/7? Well, I like the way you think. But no. Okay, so for Wednesday, your assignment, and again, if you wait to do this, like Wednesday at noon, like right before class, you might forget how to do these things because it's going to be like 4 or 5 days. But your assignment is page 147A and 148B. Note that on page 148B, you do not have to do all of them on that page. You do all of page 147 with key signatures. But on the next page, I think you only have to do numbers 9 to 15. So just be aware. But if you do all of them, it won't hurt you. All right, that's all for today, guys. If you don't have any questions, have a good break, and I'll see you next week.
And then I answered every question you all asked me. And that's what that threw me off. Pretty much immediately what the thing was on the board. I was like, it's exactly